Hello and welcome in, friends, to Outreach Radio Chicago. I am your host, Michael Mercado, and I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your day. You can follow us everywhere in the universe. We're on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like the page on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. And if you missed any pre- and post-show content, just go to YouTube/MikeMercado2333. On today's show, we have a very special guest, and he is the founder of the Brain Health Education and Research Institute. He is a former colonel in the U.S. Army for 31 years, and he was recognized by the American College of Nutrition with the prestigious 2015 Humanitarian Award. He is Dr. Michael Lewis, and he joins us today on Outreach Radio Chicago to talk about a very serious subject. If you're a fan of the NFL, which according to Nielsen, over 111 million people watch the Super Bowl, so a lot of people are. If you're a fan of any high-impact sports like boxing, UFC, if you're into hockey, if you're into the world wrestling entertainment, the big subject has been concussions. And it doesn't just affect pro athletes. It affects everybody from children to grown adults. And concussions are a disease that aren't prejudiced, so they affect everybody who's involved in things like that. So on today's show, we learn to prevent it, what a concussion really is, and what you can do to help the remedy of it if you've suffered from them. That's coming up next here on Outreach Radio Chicago with Dr. Michael Lewis. You can follow us everywhere in the universe. We're on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like the page on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. If you missed anything, go to YouTube/MikeMercado2333. Dr. Michael Lewis joins us next on Outreach Radio Chicago. Outreach Radio Chicago is on Facebook, so like our page on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. Follow me on Twitter at mmercado2333. And if you missed anything, go to YouTube/MikeMercado2333 for pre- and post-show content. We've had some great luck here on Outreach Radio Chicago with our guests, but today it's another very special one. And everything in the news, especially when it comes for sports fans, the hot button topic right now has been concussions. And on today's show, we have a very special guest. He served 31 years in the U.S. Army, finishing up retiring as a colonel. He's the founder of the Brain Health Education Center, and he is world-renowned. You've seen his stuff on CNA with Sanjay Gupta. He's joining us today on Outreach Radio Chicago with Mike Mercado. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Dr. Michael Lewis. Dr. Lewis, how you doing, buddy? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great, Mike.
One of the big things that since we've been doing this show over just about a year now, and one of the things that kept coming up from a lot of my listeners was shows about concussions, because we've done a lot of things about post-traumatic stress from soldiers coming back, and we've done a lot of things mentally about the brain. But we haven't physically talked about how important this is, and it's just now, I'm 25, to give you a little disclaimer about it. So for me, over the last, let's say, 10 years, I've really noticed from when I started playing sports till now, the education level has changed about concussions. But for those who are just tuning in for the first time, who are at the gym, who are typing on YouTube, the keyword concussion, can you give our audience a little bit about what exactly a concussion is?
Well, there's a lot to talk about there, but in the most basic terms, if you think about a concussion basically being a bruising of the brain, it happens a couple of different ways. As far as you have the initial injury, and that could be taking an elbow to the head playing soccer, or on the basketball court, or getting crushed against the boards in ice hockey, or banging helmets in football, or falling, or your kids falling on the playground, or skateboarding, or so on. But then there's that whole secondary thing. The reason why concussions don't go away is because it sets up this, at the biochemical level, the inflammatory cascades, and if we don't deal with it in the right way, then those switches don't get flipped off. And one of the problems that we have is we tell people to go sit in a dark closet for 2 weeks and they'll get better, but what happens if they don't? Mm-hmm. That's a big problem.
And we're talking about the most vital organ in your body, and we've it just amazes me though, like we finally gotten to a point where we're really taking it serious. It's not no longer, go tough it out, or just take an aspirin. Like those days are far and gone in between. Like those days don't exist anymore. What do you think was really the turning point of people taking it serious? Was it all of a sudden like Hall of Fame football players dying after committing suicide, or wrestlers going on, these rampages with their family? Like what was it that really struck a nerve with the country, in your opinion, that struck a nerve with the country to finally take this serious?
Well, I think what struck the nerve is a little bit different than the underlying situation. I'll talk about that in a second. But
yeah,
I think
please.
What really struck nerve is the work that Bennett Omalu did that was portrayed in the movie Concussion. I think that really, and you got guys like Mike Webster. I grew up near Pittsburgh, and the Steelers were everything, and you get guys like Mike Webster that start basically dying at a young age, and then you got this doctor that comes along and says it's probably because of all the hits that he had to the head. That's a big wake up call.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because when I was doing my research for this, obviously with Will Smith playing Dr. Omalu, it was, it got a lot of notoriety. The movie was fantastic. But what I find so interesting, though, is the way he describes on Good Morning America, I believe it was on, he describes that, so your skull is a barrier for the brain. But the brain still moves, right? So it's, even with the helmet on, the actual organ is knocking into the walls of your skull. So that's kind of like the whole, that's the problem with football, right? It just specifically, like when it comes to concussions for parents who have a 10-year-old who might be interested in playing football. That's what they have to keep in mind, right?
Well, it is, and one of the things that you have to realize is just because you're wearing a helmet doesn't make you concussion-proof. I mean, look at the celebrities who have died skiing, snow skiing. I mean, and they were, I think, pretty much every one of them that died in the last 5-10 years snow skiing was wearing a helmet at the time.
It's just it amazes me as well, though. We've invested so much money on different ways to protect people. And I think at the end of the day, what I see when it comes to concussions is we're looking at something that we can't cure. There's not a shot that you could take that could make the brain not move in the skull. So I've always been under the assumption, and this is, again, just me at 25 kind of, just throwing things out there. Do you believe, personally, after what Dr. Omalu said, that you should not be able to play high-impact sports, not running or anything, swimming, whatever, but high-impact sports until you hit a certain age? Is there a certain age where it's okay that your brain is developed enough, or it's as good as it's ever going to take, for the people who aren't educated when it comes to it?
Well, that's a really thought-provoking firebrand of a question, and ultimately we really don't know. You could say the brain. Some people believe that the brain continues to develop up until our mid-20s. Wow! And so, how long do you put this off? I think that, and listen, I'm a huge sports fan. I grew up playing any sport that had a ball, and I played sports up into college, switched over to rugby, and played beyond college. And so I think life is a team sport, and the lessons you learn on the fields of playing sports are invaluable. You got leadership, you've got perseverance, how to be a member of a team, how to win, how to lose. I think these are really important lessons, and I would say, while concussions are a big problem in this country, and I think obesity is a bigger problem. So we're going to have our kids sitting on the couch playing Xbox. I mean, it's ridiculous. If we eliminate football, soccer is going to take its place, and the spotlight will become on soccer. Because there's plenty of concussions there as well. And
a lot of it has to do too with I listed a number at the beginning of the show. Over 111 million people watched the Super Bowl. So all eyes right now are on the NFL and what they respond to, exactly like a movie like Concussion was. And you have parents thinking now, what age is it appropriate for your child to do anything? But then, like you just said, then okay, let's say fine, football is outlawed. Well, then you're going to play soccer, and you're still just as likely to get an elbow or a skull to skull concussion, something like that. So I think it's almost amazing. But beyond the concussion and like the nasty stuff, I was very interested to see when I worked at a little vitamin store. One of the big things that we were selling a lot of was omega-3, those type of fatty acids with fish oil, things like that for memory loss, or for people who have memory loss, especially when they get older. But what I was looking when I was doing the research for the show is, you actually believe the omega-3s can help with prevention, or is it to help with the symptoms of a concussion?
It actually could do both. So interestingly enough, I published a number of scientific papers, and one of the papers I published with a guy named Julian Bales, who your listeners would know from if they saw the movie, was played by Alec Baldwin. And so Julian Bales and I become friends, and we've done some research together. And we published a paper basically it's in Military Medicine, a journal called Military Medicine, that basically put a position out there that anybody that is at risk of concussion, a soldier or an athlete, should be taking a regular dose of fish oil daily, because it's what your brain's made of. And one of the biggest problems we have in this country is not just the obesity, but what we're consuming. And so we've become out of balance. Our brain was meant to be in balance. Our bodies were meant to be in balance. And we don't have enough omega-3s in our regular diet. And so we need to supplement them. And what Dr. Bales and I proffered was that you can increase the resilience of the brain to withstand injury with higher levels of omega-3s. And if you have an injury that does occur, even in spite of that, you have the omega-3s already there on board, ready to douse those flames of inflammation, because that's what they do. They're the counter to the inflammation, and we're lacking that in our diet today.
And for those who aren't too sure, omega-3s you could get almost anywhere, right? And they're safe for people to take. They're safe for all ages to take, right?
There are. In fact, it's actually 100% of all infant formula in the United States has omega-3 supplemented into the actual infant formula, that it's that safe. And so you can buy them at grocery stores, you can buy them at your health food stores and vitamin shops and stuff like that. So they're around. But it's probably, if you were willing to and you ate a serving of salmon or sardines or whatever good fish every day, you may not need to have the supplementation, but most people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is people find the cost efficiency of it, like, it's really expensive. I'd rather eat a filet of fish than go cook my own fish. But like you're saying right here, if you're living an active life, and it doesn't even need to be, you don't need to be a professional athlete to suffer for something like this. Like, you could go for a jog in the park and slip on, here in Chicago, you slip on some ice, which is every other day, and boom, one hit in the back of the head, and little do you know, you have a concussion. And it's interesting, we're joined here by Dr. Michael Lewis. You could find out more information at brainhealtheducation.org or dial 240-398-3491. One thing that I find really interesting, though, is you get a concussion, right? What exactly, let's say you're not taking the omega-3s, what are some of the dangers of right after a concussion that a lot of people don't know about? Because as I was reading some of your work, I mean, we're talking about things like air being deprived from your brain. Like, there's a lot of things that go into it, right?
It is. Concussions are like snowflakes. They're everyone's different, and they're complicated. And so besides the obvious ones that somebody's knocked unconscious or they get up and they can't even walk straight, they're wobbly or whatever. Some of the bigger concerns that happen maybe right away, but maybe even come on a week or two later or down the line, is that concept of brain fog, like that really bad head cold that just won't go away. You can't think through. You get a bad head cold and you just can't think straight. That doesn't go away. Headaches are a big issue. And what I find with like some of the NFL players that I've dealt with that are getting, older, up in the years, is their energy levels are completely gone. People have difficulty sleeping. So you could have any or all of these symptoms. And, one of the nice things about omega-3s is they actually help with a lot, if not most of those symptoms as well. But everybody's different. And as you said before, it's not a drug, it's not a cure, it's nutrition. And we're missing that basic nutritional foundation to help our brains heal.
Now, I find that really interesting as well. One of the main things that we do here on the show is a lot of things can be solved in your body by two things: doing the research and eating right. Why do you find it so hard for people to take care of something as essential as their brain? We'll see people spend money on the gym to get the abs. We'll see people spend money on manicures and pedicures. Why is it that people are so far behind? Maybe now we're catching up, but we're so far behind, and people didn't want to wear helmets when they were riding their bikes.
Well, I think we could talk about a bunch of stuff for a long time, but I don't want to say we were misled, but I think it was I'd like to basically say that the whole food pyramid thing and what we've been taught over the last 40-some years has been completely ridiculous. And the idea that fat is bad and sugar and carbohydrates are good, I think was completely inverse of what we should have been saying. And while fat can be bad, there are really good fats that we need in our diet, and omega-3s are the most important of those fats that you need in the diet. And to go with a zero-fat diet and a vegan diet and stuff like that, I think that's misleading people in the wrong way.
And again, folks listening to Outreach Radio Chicago, you hear it, every single great guest that we have. Please just do the research. There's so much more information now than there was even 5 years ago. And it brings me to this personally. Do you feel where do you see this type of practice going? I mean, we've learned so much already about what to take with your diet in order to help the brain with omegas, making sure you're eating the right fish, so on and so forth. But 15 years from now, we're having this discussion again. Where are we when it comes to what we're taking to prevent or help with the symptoms of concussions? Did we find a way to get rid of them? Or is it like broken bones and colds? They're never going to go away.
Well, I think they're never going to go away, number one. But we can improve the risk profile. We can do things to help decrease the risks. And when it doesn't matter whether you're talking about your 8-year-old playing on the playground or skateboarding or riding a bike, or are we talking about your high school football player or your teenage girl playing soccer or your professional athlete, is you really need to pay better attention to nutrition. Where would I like to be in 15 years from now? Well, right now, I was saying to a friend of mine who's a researcher at University of London, I said, we don't treat concussions any different than we did 500 years ago. And she laughed and said, that's not quite true. And I'm really? And she says, no, it's at least 1,000 years. and I want to see that change. I think that omega-3s should, 15 years from now, I think if you have a concussion, I think doctors or parents or moms out there should be thinking about picking up the bottle of fish oil and increasing the amount of fish oil intake to help the brain heal as best as possible.
Now, I know you went on it a little bit earlier, and Dr. Michael Lewis is joining us today. He's been fantastic with his time, giving us some really cool information so we could do our own research. You could follow him and see all his work at brainhealtheducation.org or dial 240-398-3491, and that's brainhealtheducation.org. Now, for someone like myself, right, you take the multivitamin, you take the omega-3s, and you take a couple fish oil. Is that a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that a good program in general for anybody my age, average health, just trying to survive the Chicago winter?
I think so. If there was one supplement that I would tell anybody to take, it would be to take a good high-quality fish oil. Mm-hmm. It doesn't hurt to take a good multivitamin. That may be a little bit controversial, but I look at it, it's great when people and doctors and nutritionists and dietitians all say, well, you can get all the nutrients you need from the food that you should be eating. I think that's a little naive. I think that the food supply and the way we farm food has changed so much over the last 100 years that we're not getting the micronutrients that we should be getting from our food. And I think that in a way we've become obese and malnourished at the micronutrient level at the same time.
As you see, and in today's day and age too, where places like Whole Foods are just booming and everybody's really conscious about their health, you would think being able to eat a nice salmon would be a very easy thing to ask of a person. And unfortunately, it seems like now we're just starting to learn. But, people like you continue to do the work, and we keep learning new things from the work that you're giving us. So, it's fantastic. And I'm curious about one thing, and I wanted to ask in the beginning of the show. I have never actually suffered from a concussion. Let me put this again. I've probably never been diagnosed with a concussion playing sports. When you get in the quote unquote the worst thing ever, you got your bell rung, or you're seeing the bell, you're seeing bells, whatever. Like, what do you think should be the test to see if somebody has a concussion, and what is currently what are currently people doing to test for a concussion?
Well, there's lots of technology, lots of money going into the research to diagnose concussions. Unfortunately, there's a number of good tests out there, but not a single one of them can tell you, yes, you've had a concussion. It still takes a clinical diagnosis, and the doctor has more tools available to try to make that diagnosis. But, it's not like in the cartoons where, you see Tweety Bird or whatever with, with the bells and whistles going, stars going around their head. Unfortunately, it's not like that. It's an invisible wound, and doctors sometimes get it wrong. And, technology's coming along where we're starting to look at potentially blood tests, and there's neurocognitive tests that you take in front of computers, and there's balance tests and eye tracking tests and stuff like that. And so technology is really moving forward, but not one of those is a yes, no, you've had a concussion. They're just tools to be used by a good clinician.
Dr. Michael Lewis, you've been awesome here on Outreach Radio Chicago. I'm really hoping that, a mom, a dad, a brother, sister, somebody listens to this and they're able just to get a little bit more research. I mean, it's so important. And I mean, something as simple as taking your omega-3s, making sure you're eating the right rate, doing the proper research, and you could avoid, or at the very least, help yourself in these types of situations. Doc, is there anything you want to, tag before you go? Any last advice you want to give to anybody who's worried about sending their kids off to high school football, or even, on a winter come, in a few weeks when people are on the pond ice skating? Is there any last advice you want to give?
Well, I don't just say all this because I think it's a good thing to say. I've got a 15-year-old who plays high school football, and so I've got a very vested interest in this. And I tell you, he does not leave. And people often ask how much. Well, number one, they always ask, how can you let your son play football? And I talked about team sports, but what do you do? So what I do is he does not leave, and my whole family, included myself included, we do not leave the breakfast table without taking 4 or 5 capsules of good quality fish oil. We use Nordic Naturals for our family. But I don't let my son leave the breakfast table without taking 4 or 5 capsules of good quality fish oil every single day.
So you're practicing it
year-round, not just during football season.
Yeah, you're practicing what you preach, and you've seen the research, and you even let your boy play, which is awesome because, like you said, for all the things that we could point out about this very serious, dangerous disease, sports are a big part of not just the country but the world. It builds teamwork, leadership, and thanks to doctors like yourself and researchers, we're learning how to make sure that we're still leaving our kids safe. And even for ourselves, the weekend warriors who play at the playground, we're allowing ourselves to be safe. Dr. Michael Lewis, you can find all his information at brainhealtheducation.org. That's 240-398-3491, 240-398-3491, brainhealtheducation.org. When helmets collide, you can see all his research as well. He's all over the place, been on CNN, other podcasts, around the radio. We've been very honored to have you on Outreach Radio Chicago. Dr. Michael Lewis, we hope to have you on very soon. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll be right back on Outreach Radio Chicago. Thank you again, guys, for listening to us today on Outreach Radio Chicago. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at mmercado2333. Like the radio show page on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. And if you missed anything, pre or post show content, just go to YouTube/Mike Mercado 2333. For everybody here at Outreach Radio Chicago, I'm Mike Mercado. Take us home, Hav. Hey everybody, Mike Mercado here from Outreach Radio Chicago, and I just want to thank you all for all the support you have given us on the brand new show. If someone you know wants to get the word out on a fundraiser, charity, or foundation in your local community, please send us an email at outreachradiochicago@gmail.com or send me one personally at mmercado@newswebradio.net. Or you can tweet me at mmercado2333, and don't forget to like our Facebook page at Outreach Radio Chicago. From right here at the studios, we'll see you next time on Outreach Radio